Hey guys, Blue Gal here. So much to talk to you about today. Uh, I wanted to start with finished socks. They did get finished at 10:45 Friday night, January 31st. I finished the January socks, and these are a little bit of lace and Croy sock yarn in the colorway geranium, and they're done. And they're nice, sturdy socks with a lace element. So I'm happy with those. Uh, and I'm working on the February socks now. This is a colorway called First Frost, and I just love it. I will link the yarn below. But my youngest child told me that this looked like Monet's water lilies, and I agree. It's just so pretty. It's the yarn is Soft Rose by Ruby and Roses. I will link below what this yarn is. But it is a 85% superwash, 15% nylon. So soft, and I'm past the heel, and I'm. It's just lovely. It's just lovely soft yarn. I'm doing 60 stitches on size 2 needles, 15 rows of knit 1, purl 1. This is the yarn pattern. This is the sock pattern in my head. 15 rows of knit 1, purl 1, and then knit 3, purl 1, a little light ribbing. And in this particular case, I went ahead and made the top of the sock 27 stitches instead of 30. Size 2 needles, if I didn't say that already. I wanted the top of the sock to start and end with a knit 3 rather than have the purl 1 go along the gusset. I have found that I didn't like that. It got too loosey goosey. So all knitting along the gusset decreases is making that, if you can see that, it's making it a lot tighter and more consistent in terms of not having that purl ridge going in there. If you know, you know. That purl ridge was getting loosey goosey, and I didn't like it. So I'm going all knitting along the there we go, along the decreases on the gusset, and it's just a basic top down sock. Uh, it's so funny. I know I've said this before, but I saw a sock on Ravelry one time that I liked, and I went, I wonder how she made that sock. And the notes were 64 stitches, 71 grams. And I went, oh, that's how she made that sock, because that's all I needed to know. If you made as many top down socks as I have, you don't need to know much more than that. How many grams of yarn did you need, and how many stitches did you use? And the needle size helps. But uh, I want to talk a little bit about knit alongs, because there's a lot of them going on right now. Uh, the one that I came up with for the month, Love Yourself, Selfish Knitting Month, and this is about pulling out a UFO, and the one that you have for yourself, and working on it, and hopefully finishing it. I pulled out and frogged my first go at the Motley Hoof cowl. I had cast it on according to pattern, and I didn't like it because it was too narrow for me. This is a Madeline Tosh pattern. It is to sell a kit. I will show you because they have a picture here of the little bag of minis that they're selling to make this cowl. But the pattern is a paid pattern online on Ravelry. It's the Motley Hoof, and it is supposed to be very close to the neck, but I just didn't like it. And I was casting it on with a variegated yarn, which I also didn't like. I didn't like how any of it was working out for me. One of the things that's really nice about this pattern is the author does show how many grams of yarn you need for each color. So that is very helpful from the standpoint of being able to find leftovers in your stash, that will I have enough of that color to make this cowl, and that's helpful. However, I could sort of throw that out the window because I decided to add 2 repeats to this cowl. So now I really do have to make sure I've got a lot of each color uh, to keep going, and I do. Um, I'm making sure that I'm using something that has. This originally called for 14 grams each, so I'm making sure I have 20 grams of something before I use it um, in this cowl. And I cast on in a solid teal color. And I'm not very far along to show you what's going on, but I did get the ribbing done and I'm working on the color work now. But what I wanted to show you about this, when I originally downloaded this, the only thing they had in the pattern was a black and white little chart. And when I printed it out again, they had updated it with a color chart, which is great. I thought that was helpful. Um, the color chart is 3 of the mini charts. So the mini charts are 14 stitches, and the color chart is 3 of those. So it's 42 stitches. And so I was casting on using the color chart, and I thought that that would be easier. And it turned out no, it's actually easier to read the black and white one. And more importantly, to go ahead and put, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Put markers every 14 stitches. Hi there. Um, the more markers you can put in to follow along with what you're doing, whether it's increases, whether it's decreases, whether it's, uh, end of round, all of that. Use different colored markers. Make sure that you are setting yourself up so that you can read your knitting the way you read a pattern. And I know a lot of more advanced knitting instructions talk a lot about that. The ability to read your knitting is what separates the novice from the expert. And when you read across to a pattern which says, knit 3, purl 3, knit 2, purl 1, whatever across, and you're reading that, to be able to look at your knitting and say that, oh, I see, knit 3, purl 3, knit 2, purl 1. I can see them on my needles that way, and you're able to read it. You're able to see a yarn over. You're able to see a decrease, and say, okay, yes, I did this right because I'm looking at it, and I can see the pattern says, knit 2, yarn over, knit 2, decrease, and I can look and say, okay, I did that. The ability to look at your knitting and see that you did what's in the pattern because you're reading your knitting. And I will tell you, I'm a left-handed knitter and I knit left to right. That is an advantage to left-handed knitting. And I'm always, it drives certain knitters crazy. I see you, Karen. There are certain friends of mine who just go, I hate the way you knit. I just hate it. I can't watch. No, but if you knit right to left, if you're knitting regular English way and you're knitting right to left, still the ability to read it and say, okay, I knit 3, I purled 3, I yarned over, I did a decrease, I went on. That's the important thing. Being able to see what you did, look at the pattern, read what you did, and know that you got it right, that you followed the pattern, and being able to read your knitting is so important. So get into the practice of doing that. And then, like I said, I'm using the 14 stitch chart rather than the 42 stitch chart. So I am putting a marker every 14 stitches. And that seems like a lot of markers to be sliding along, but you don't even notice. And it helps so much to be able to know, be able to just look at 14 stitches rather than 42 to say, did I knit 1 in color A, 3 in color B, 5 in color A, 3 in color B, 1 in color A? Yes, I did. So I did it right. And that's just one row, and every row is different. So you've got to follow along and keep track of that. The more you can do to mark your knitting, to keep track of what you're doing, the better off you'll be, especially with something that's color work or has a lot of changes going on as you're knitting along. For instance, with this sock, I had one marker. end of round. Actually, I took it out because I left the end in, so I know where the end of round. I know which needle change because I'm using 3 needles and knitting with the 4th, so I knew when between the 2 needles that had this little ball of yarn at the end, I knew that's the end of the round. So I even took that one out. So yeah, it wound up being 0. It wound up being 0 markers, but in this one, every 14 stitches for how many did I cast on? I wound up casting on 168 instead of 140. So 168 stitches. And every 14 stitches, I have a marker. All right. Be kind to yourself. It's selfish knitting, but it's not be mean to yourself knitting. It's be kind to yourself knitting. And then there's a couple other knit alongs to tell you about. Some of which I will participate in as possible. There is, what did I do with my little sheet of paper? Oh, there is a Knit the Sky knit along going on, and I will link to that. It's a Blue Sky post. I will link to that below. Everyone is knitting something blue. Blue Sky KAL is the hashtag. And so I made this hat last year. It's got a French name, like neige. It's like, I can't remember, like Blue Frost or something like that. Anyway, it's a side to side with a big cable, and then you decrease along the side and do short rows, and it winds up being a bucket hat with a cable going around your head. But it's all knit in one piece. You don't knit the cable. You don't knit the cable panel and then put the hat on. You actually cast on and knit all the way around the hat. And these are just short rows. So I have 2 more skeins of this yarn. This is I've shown this in a very early podcast. If you've been watching all along, you know this. This is Manos del Uruguay in color Q, kettle dyed. I have 2 skeins left. This was Marianne yarn. And so I'm going to make a cowl. And whether I get to it this month or not, I will tag this Sky KAL anyway, because it's blue. We're knitting blue? Huh. That's interesting. Knitting blue, and there's actually a new blue free pattern out by Kieran Foley this year, 2025, copyright 2025 free pattern called Gulf of Mexico. Go figure. And it's a free pattern, so I'm going to show all of this. It's a little scarf done with decreases and kind of a, you can see it's got a ridge in the middle there, and it's just a big long kind of tie scarf, but it increases up to a point and then decreases back down to a point. And the pattern apologizes for the fact that when you cast on with a little teeny tiny stitch and when you bind off with a little teeny tiny stitch, it's not quite symmetrical. Oh no, they're not quite the same. I love that. Perfectionism. Yeah, let's go for it. Gulf of Mexico is a free pattern by Gulf of Mexico by Kieran Foley, and a lot of people are knitting this using blue scraps. So we're all feeling a little scrappy right now, and getting out your blue scraps and combining them. And this is held double, so this scarf will go really, really fast. It's not a lot of yarn. It's a lot of leftovers, and just grab your blue scraps. As you can see, blue scrap. Free pattern. Kieran Foley, Gulf of Mexico on Ravelry. It has come to my attention that people loved Knit a Second Sock that we did in January. So last week of the month, every month, we're going to do Knit a Second Sock. Just to let you guys catch up and let me catch up. Like I said, I finished my January socks on January 31st at 10:45 p.m. So yeah, I'm there with you. Finishing that second sock can be quite a challenge. Having a knit along makes it more fun and easy, and get you going. So let's do that. Is there anything else I need to say about my knitting? I don't think so. I think we're good. My husband and I were on with Cliff Schechter today live on YouTube. So Tuesday. I'm recording on Tuesday, by the way. I decided to record this knitting podcast today because I already had makeup on. So it's like, oh, I've got the makeup on. Let's do it. I'm going to read. Last week, I read from Mary Thomas's Knitting Pattern Book. Today, I'm going to read from Mary Thomas's Knitting Book, which came out earlier. The Knitting Pattern Book came out in 1943 out of London. This is 1938 out of London. Difficult times in Europe. And the knitting book, she put these together. And I'm going to read from, and I recommended this before. I really think it's fun. Go through your knitting books and read the preface, just for a little escape into the world of the author of these knitting books, whether it's a pattern book or not. Often they have a personal statement or a idea about their philosophy of knitting, something about how the book came about, and not just acknowledgments, but some more of the spirit of what the book means to them. And I just think that that's a lovely thing to find out and explore. And it often just gets turned over going for the patterns. Go back and look at your knitting books and see and get to know the people who put those books together. It's a fun thing to do. So this is the preface to Mary Thomas's Knitting Book, copyright 1938. If all the looms in the world ceased to produce cloth, and the art of spinning and knitting alone remained, we could still be clothed both warmly and fashionably. Such is knitting, which without doubt is the most resourceful and inventive method of fabric construction in the world. Being made without loom or machine, without warp or weft, shaped as it is constructed, patterned as whim requires, and divided without being cut. All things are possible in knitting. Women knit almost by instinct. Men now for pleasure, though not so long past it provided him with a means of livelihood. In teaching a child to knit, begin right. Let her learn how to hold her needles, wind her yarn, cast on and cast off in tension. Pair her stitches when forming an increase or decrease. Turn. Create different triangular shapes, learning their use. Knit up, and so forth. These are the technique of knitting, upon which the whole structure is built, and learnt young will never be forgotten. Knitting should be done thoughtfully. It should not be hurried. That is its charm to our generation, who live surrounded with a wild helter-skelter of speed. It is creative, and that is its supreme satisfaction. If things go wrong, don't get impatient. Remember, it took 6 years to make a master knitter. All ages have contributed their quota to the progress of knitting, and that combined by the modern knitter is style. A modern knitted garment is not a thing to be dragged on for extra warmth, but has, in its own right, a place in the world of fashion. Mary Thomas's Knitting Book, 1938. And it is, I forgot to show you this. This is something that was just a piece of bulky rayon yarn that I had in my stash and I didn't know what to do with, and I said, I'm just going to make a cowl. So, cast on to make it, I like it dangly like a necklace. I did about 1.5 inches of seed and then finished off with stockinette because I got bored and just wanted to finish it. And I just finished until the very end of the skein cast off. I think I had a couple inches left. That was it. And it's a really nice necklace. It's heavy. So I like the colors. Oh, the colors are gold and then green and purple. Green and purple is one of my favorite combinations. Green and purple and white is the suffragette colorway, in case you didn't know. All right. I hope you guys have a great week and knit for yourself. Find something in your stash that you've been working on and put away, a UFO that you are knitting for yourself, and get to work on it and have fun. And we'll see you next week. Bye bye.